Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm showing you the 4-piece 3-dimensional or multi-layered American flag stencil. Um, this piece, the actual flag that you would spray will measure to be somewhere at around 3 by 5.5 as far as the actual size. The biggest piece is the piece in the top left corner, which is to outline the red. And if you want to open space, you may want to trim that down, trim the corners off to make it a little easier for you to maneuver. I cut it a little big so that you as the user will have that option to trim that down so it can fit in certain corners and stuff. So what I'm doing right now is I'm using the outline portion of the stencil to outline this flag. I'm tracing it in black because the rest of this body is going to be in black. I have a tip and a trick at the end of this video if you want to see what to use instead of using the outline stencil. So feel free to check that out too. Once you have your outline done, it pretty much just sets you up for the rest of the pieces. The key part of this entire 4-piece stencil is the top left corner of the outline. That pretty much lines up the stars and the blue section of the flag. So in this case, you don't have to mark the stencils unless you want to mark them yourself so that you know where they'll be placed. It's that top left corner that kind of guides you as to where to place the next stencil in the sequence. Right now I'm just drying out this black. So once you complete your outline, in order to get a realistic effect, to get the wave look, what I'm doing right now is I'm doing some dagger strokes in black for my shadows. And if you're not experienced with dagger strokes, you might want to practice beforehand or paint the entire area so that when you dagger stroke, you don't dagger stroke outside of the space that you painted. So now I'm doing my dagger strokes in white, which will give me my highlights in the flag. And you see I'm just pretty much just running up and down and just one color. My paint is reduced 1-to-1. That's 1 part paint, 1 part reducer. And right now it's it's pretty much just black and white stripes coming through, but they're very light except for probably the one. I noticed that once it was done. But what I'm doing now is I'm lining up my stars, and like I said, that top left corner of this stencil, when you put those stars in place, those stars that are close to the edge, you'll see where they kind of lined up. On the left side of the flag and on the top corner of the flag, those stars line up perfectly. So once you push that stencil into that corner of your outline, you'll basically know where that piece will be centered. And then once you paint your stars, you've already got your shadows and highlights. See, when you're painting on RC bodies, you do everything in reverse. So you have to work your way backwards instead of going forward. So right now I'm using a pearl blue, and what I'm going to do is just spray a couple of coats of the pearl blue. You can pretty much use any blue you want. If you want to use a candy blue, just a regular blue, that's up to you. I like the pearl. It has a little more feeling to it than just the regular blue. Now the candy blue you can get away with, but it's another step because you have to back it before you add the red or the other colors. So right now I'm pretty much outlining the blue section. And again, just like with the stars, it's that top left corner of this stencil that's shaped like the outline. So once you push that square for the blue up into the top left corner, you'll see when it lines up with that top corner, and you can spray it. The cuts on these stencils, because they're cut by laser, they're very accurate. So when you push that stencil up in the corner, the second you hit the right mark, you'll see it because of the curvature of that left corner and that top corner above that particular area. I'm spraying, now that I've laid that particular square down, I'm laying in a little bit more blue so that the other colors don't come through when I do the white over top. It'll help it pop a little bit, but I want to be sure that that's all that's going to happen. It's going to pop, and it's not going to be too much white that's going to shine through. And because colors are reflective of each other, now what I'm doing is just adding a little bit of blue in the dagger stroke, because white is reflective of color and the blue is basically in the flag. So as the flag waves, it picks up some of that color from the blue. So I added a few blue dagger strokes to reflect from the white. This is all true in nature. If you look at a real American flag that's waving, you'll see that the white is going to reflect the blue. What I'm doing right now is getting this red ready, and this is another example of what I meant by the stencil that I cut for the red. It's a little big, but I cut it that way on purpose. And by big, I mean the actual box, the square. Usually I would cut that, but I didn't want to cut it while I was doing it here. I wanted you guys to see that is the material that I'm using is very flexible. So it'll bend in the corners, it'll curve. This way you can really maneuver it inside of an RC body if you have to. But generally, I would have took my X-Acto knife and cut those corners out and just turned my air pressure down so I don't get too much overspray. It just would have took a little bit longer. So what I end up doing as a part of this is that I end up doing the red sections in sections. I do a little bit here. I dry it because I don't want to drag paint around as I'm maneuvering this stencil. So what I'm doing now is I'm painting one of the corners, the bottom left corner of this stencil, and you can see it on the stencil, that where the paint is. That's the only part of the red that I painted so far, but I don't want my paint to be saturated, too wet. But I don't want to have to go back either. So I sprayed just enough paint to cover my area, took the stencil away and dried it. Now, if I would have trimmed the edges of the square that's surrounding the red section, I probably could have got this done in one pass. It would have laid flat. But if you look, you can see how the stencil is up in the corner. So I can't spray everything. I'm holding down the top section of the red, and if you look at the stencil, you can see that. You see what I'm drawing. This is because I don't want my reds to bleed all over the place, and I don't want the overspray to go under the stencil. So I'm taking my time with this. If I would have centered this in the middle of this piece, I could have just laid it down and sprayed this red with no problem. But I did this purposely so you can see that if you have to be in a tight corner, the stencil is thin enough that if you take your time, you can work the stencil into the corners and wrap your flag around something. You just have to take your time and go a little bit here and a little bit there, like I'm doing. So now I'm going to line up this last portion, And once you do that, you pretty much can, you'll learn how to wrap this stencil around. But again, like I was saying, at the end of the video, I have a tips and a trick to help you line up your outline better for different purposes and different applications. So make sure you check that out too. So right here, I'm finishing up that top portion of red, and now I have to I'm going to go back to where I started in that bottom left corner so that I can finish off the last portion of red. And you have to be careful, because you don't want to work on one end and don't line it up perfectly, because then your colors, when you do the red, they won't line up. So take your time, line them up. That's what the stencil is for. Use your fingers, hold them down. If you want to use tape, after you dry, use a light painter's tape and press it down. If you don't have the space or the hand power to do it and control your brush and your piece, you can use tape, but use it very lightly, very sparingly, so that you can get the line straight. But another thing that's great about this piece, it's not a straight American flag. It's waved and it's tattered, so it has tears and rips, which work out fine. Now, what I'm doing now is I'm adding some red dagger strokes, because like I said previously about how white is reflective of color that's around it, it's also reflecting the red as well as the blue. So the red is an opaque, but I didn't spray it heavy. So just like with the blue pearl, I'm backing all of this in white. There is no need for a white stencil for your lines, and the reason being is that if you were to spray the white first, when I did the stars, when you spray the red on top of the white, the chances are that the red is going to bleed into your white, and you're going to have pink and red stripes instead of white and red stripes. So the sequence that I'm spraying in is the best method to do this. You spray your red stripes first, then you spray your white on top of it. And what this will do is it will brighten up your red, but it will also keep your white clear, and it will be white. It won't be pink. The reds won't bleed through, but the white will definitely help the red pop, which is a good thing, because now you've got your highlights and your shadows in, and you just backed everything in white so that those colors will come through. And once you're completed, the last thing you want to do is back everything in black, like I'm doing, and pretty much I'm done with this flag. And literally, this took about 12 minutes, give or take. And if I would have centered it, I could have shaved 3 minutes off instead of having to do all of the different layouts with the red. But if I would have masked this off with tape, I would have had to cut each section out. I would have had to have a different star stencil set so I can lay the stars, and I would have had to shadow and shade each section. And when you do that, it's a little tricky because it doesn't always line up properly with the shadows and shades. But with this method and this stencil set, you can get you a nice wavy American tattered flag and be done with it ASAP. So, it's a great stencil set. It's not expensive, and it's on my eBay store right now. So take your asses there and go get it. If you have any questions, let me know. In the meantime, I'll be back later with more stencils. Don't forget to check out the tip at the end as far as how to bypass that first step with the outline stencil. Thanks again, guys. Hey, what's up everybody? I have a great tip for you and a trick for those who are interested in purchasing the American flag 4-part stencil. Let's say you don't want to just paint this in the beginning, or you want to mask off a certain area to paint this in later. There's even a great trick, like if you wanted to put something and paint something first and then have this behind it in the background. All you simply have to do, and here's the trick, you take your outline stencil and you trace it onto some painter's tape, and then you take the painter's tape and put it in over the body. That way the painter's tape will preserve the location while you work on the rest of the body. And then when you're ready for it, you can simply peel away the painter's tape, bypass the first part of my tutorial where I spray over the outline. Once you bypass that, then your next step would be to simply spray in your highlights and your shadows with the black and white like I did, so you can get the wave effect. You get your highlights and your shadows. And then take over from my tutorial from there. After you do your highlights and shadows, you do your stars, you do your blue, you do your red, then you back it with white so that you can get the colors to pop a little bit, and let the shadows and the highlights do the rest of the work, and you're all good to go. There's your tip.